Hello, I'm wishing you in advance a good Yom Tov. This drosha is intended for those who, for whatever reason, will not make it to shul on Kol Nidrei. And I wish you all a Gemar Chasima Tova, a successful end to the process we began on Rosh Hashanah, a good ceiling for all of us who are present in shul, those who are not able to be in shul, other members of our community, our families, the Jewish people across the globe and all humanity. Every year, and this year is no exception, I ask for mechila, forgiveness. We have many, many hundreds of interactions during the year, and it isn't always possible to say or do the right thing. If I've said anything to upset you, please forgive me, and of course, I forgive you too. A brief word about the Kol Nidrei appeal, which is done with a difference this year. This year, there is no physical appeal, there are no cards due to the circumstances. However, it's online and we are making our appeal as usual. Do watch it, it's been widely circulated. If you haven't seen it, when there's a chance, please do watch it. As always, a third will go to the development of our shul. We have so many wonderful programs that need funding to ensure we're there for every member of the community, of every demographic. And this support is needed more than ever in difficult times. A third go to United Synagogue projects and University Jewish Chaplaincy. That's to include Tribe, Chesed and other things, and the work on campus, of which, as you know, I'm deeply involved. And the final third, the executive and the board of our community have decided to divide that third between two really excellent causes. JWA, that's Jewish Women's Aid, which provides proper support for women who are suffering from domestic abuse, other awful problems, and providing an appropriate space, counselling and assistance where needed. More details in the appeal itself and on their website. And we are also supporting the Chicken Soup Shelter, just 10 miles or so from Golders Green. There are many people in need of food on a daily basis, somewhere to go, somewhere to meet, and during this time, somewhere to take food away from to ensure they have a hot meal. Please give generously to our appeal to support both of these excellent causes and the shul and the United Synagogue as well. Please watch the online appeal and check the websites of the various causes we're supporting. Before coming to discuss the current challenges, I want you to remember that there was a world BC. Of course, this doesn't mean before the Common Era, but it means before COVID. It's easy to forget that the year 5780 began as a normal one, and that for the first 5 months, life proceeded as normal. Major things have happened and they should not be overlooked. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've used my Kol Nidrei drosha to discuss our anxieties, the anxieties of the broader Jewish community about the direction of the Labour Party, about the hijacking of a once great political party by far-left cranks, conspiracy theorists and anti-Semites. Let's not forget that many of us, according to some surveys, as many as 40% of the Jewish community in this country were beginning to wonder whether they could remain as Jews in this country, where we would have a place in the UK in the event that Corbyn had come to power. We shouldn't forget, because of all the things that have happened in the last 6 months, that on the 12th of December 2019, many of us held our breath, scared for the future. I was actually in Israel on the 12th of December. Even the prospect of going to Israel at the moment seems like a distant dream. I was on a short trip for the United Synagogue and University Jewish Chaplaincy. And it's interesting, when there's a major event, something major, you tend to remember small details of the day. Sadly, the Chief Rabbi's father had passed away and I attended the funeral. Then I went to speak at an event which he was supposed to have been at. And then I went late on Thursday evening to Ben Gurion Airport to travel home so I could be home for Shabbos with the family. At midnight, which was 10 o'clock when the exit polls were published in the UK, I was at the airport actually getting ready to board, and the exit polls showed what eventually became a major defeat for Corbyn's party. You could say Batel Machshavos Sonenu, that we pray every year that the designs of our enemies should be thwarted, and thank God this particular concern has moved along into the past. But it was very real. And the sobering reality is that throughout our long history, the tide has sometimes turned quite suddenly against us. We have much to be thankful for living in a Malchus Shel Chesed, a kind and supportive country, and irrespective of our personal politics. I'm sure we all hope that Keir Starmer is able to purge the cranks and restore the Labour Party to be an credible entity, a real opposition and a force for good. 5780 was also the year of Black Lives Matter, the awful murder of George Floyd, which created so much havoc around the world, is part of a very, very complex political narrative, but one to which we as human beings cannot and must not be insensitive. We continue to see the impact of climate change. It's increasingly hard to ignore as it intensifies. Look at what's been going on in Eastern Australia, the west coast of the USA, and learning how to tackle climate change remains a top agenda item. Sustainability and education around this issue is a priority for our community this year, and they're easy things to neglect in difficult times. Yet, of course, the year was dominated by a virus that this time last year none of us had heard of because it didn't really exist, that's changed the world in a few very, very long months. It's impacted on every one of us in the most profound and irreversible ways. On Yom Kippur, a day which is frozen in time, an annual gift from God to consider who we are, our identity, our aspirations, a moment to hold a mirror to our failures, to reimagine ourselves as Jews, as human beings. And when we embark on a programme of personal and communal growth, on such a day, we can move from what we did on Rosh Hashanah, which was considering our response as a community and as individuals at a practical level to the virus, to perhaps for a few moments thinking about the way we should consider and understand what has become a major global disaster. Of course, it's not a new question. Sadly, humanity has been beset with catastrophes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and pandemics that have caused untold misery, not to mention the man-made disasters of war, persecution, slavery. How do we think about these things? And unfortunately, there is a tendency to superficial and simplistic explanations. And religious leaders are very often the worst culprits. It's not difficult to find religious leaders who will say things, do you know why it happened, whatever it might be, currently the pandemic, is because you didn't believe sufficiently in X. It could be God. It could be the coming of Jesus. It could be the Prophet Muhammad. And if these leaders are not blaming our beliefs, they look at our behaviour at some micro level as though they had some profound divine insight. It's a punishment for failure to do or not do Y, a failure to keep Shabbos, a failure to deal with the wicked lifestyle of certain people. And of course, that old favourite of certain types of rabbis, the problem is caused by women's lack of modesty. But the truth is, as offensive as these explanations seem to be, others not in the religious world can be just as bad. Everyone has issues that are focal to them, that are high priorities, that they feel the world is neglecting. And most of these issues are very, very important. And the secular sages may just as easily say, you know, the pandemic's been caused by neglect of the environment, by disruption of the food chain, by misuse of natural resources of our over-pressured modern lives that have weakened our constitutions. To be clear, every one of these issues is important, but to somehow be able, whether as a religious leader or a secular sage, to attribute the cause of the pandemic to one of them, this seems to me to be a major error. I recently read the monograph by the French public intellectual Bernard-Henri Lévy. It's translated into English from French as The Virus in the Age of Madness. He describes this approach as foolish conceit. He says, the idea that the virus is speaking to us, that it has a message to deliver, and that because nothing in this world happens without cause or intention, this particular virus, this coronavirus, this virus with spikes and a crown, this king of a virus, must be secretly invested like a cunning ruse of Hegelian history with a part of the spirit of the world, and thus with a mission. As if a virus could think, know, or intend anything. As if a virus was living. They, and he's talking about the kind of people I've mentioned, said Levi, they fob off on us, disguised as good medicine, old finger-pointing claptrap, that they hope this time will stick. Harsh words. But appealing as this approach may be, at first glance, it is refuted by the Rambam, the classic source on this type of issue. In the laws of fasts were originally, not as we have today, specific fixed fasts to commemorate the temple, but fasts that were proclaimed by the community in response to catastrophe. And in the laws of how to set up those fasts and how to run them, he explains there is a biblical mitzvah to cry out to God when calamities come upon the community and the world. This is one of the processes of tshuva, repentance. People need to know that because of their bad deeds, things went bad for them. And this process of tshuva and crying out to God will cause him to remove this problem from them. Very different from what Levi says. And then the Rambam goes on to say that it's someone who does not engage in those processes, but instead say, Dover zeh miminhag shaloilom. This is just how the world is. And that, Erolon, it just happened to us. It's by chance. The diagnosis of the Rambam for those people who take that approach, Harei zeh derech achzorius. Literally, this is the way of cruelty. And says the Rambam merely perpetuates the bad behaviour. Again, at first glance, this draws a line between wrongdoing and certain catastrophes, which is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. We've done wrong, and we must do tshuva, and it will be corrected. But that is a misunderstanding of the Rambam. The Rambam never, ever attributes a specific cause. He never says, or attempts to say, or allows people to say, that when something goes wrong in our world, in our community, a natural calamity of the sort that we're discussing, that it was caused by something specific, personal failure, community failure. He never says that. It could be that in the era of the prophets, there were those who had some direct line, but certainly not in the time of the Rambam, and most definitely not in our time. That is not what the Rambam means. What he is saying is that there is a cause. We should not think that the universe is meaningless. We should not think that things just happen by random chance. But he, like we, must admit that we can never know what that cause is. And when he says, Zeh derech achzorius, this is the way of cruelty, he means that we consign the whole of life, its pain, and of course by extension, its joys, to the world of chance. And as such, life is meaningless. There is nothing more disheartening, distressing, and energy sapping than a sense that our lives are purposeless and that whatever may happen to us has no meaning. That is what the Rambam says. But God forbid we should ever, in the non-prophetic era, attempt to attribute a cause because we simply do not and cannot know what it may be. In short, I believe that when coming to ask the question why about any catastrophe, and specifically about the current crisis, we must strongly resist any specific interpretation identifying a cause, while equally strongly resisting the notion that it has no cause and therefore life is meaningless. When asked why, both religious leaders and liberal prophets alike may need a little humility and learn to say, I don't and cannot know what the cause is. But where does that leave us? For me, I suppose I am relieved of the burden of trying or being expected to interpret the uninterpretable. And for all of us, it's going to be about learning to live with uncertainty and responding to things which we can't change. Indeed, Viktor Frankl, whom I quoted on Rosh Hashanah, said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are then challenged to change ourselves. And that dovetails with Nietzsche's famous observation in Twilight of the Idols. Out of life's school of war, says Nietzsche. The school of war means the challenges that come upon us. What does not kill me makes me stronger. It's a very famous quote, meaning that our responsibility lies in the area of response, personal growth and development. Because in essence, our response as individuals, as communities, as the Jewish people, as the human race, must be growth and change. In the words of Wired to Create, a book I particularly like by Kaufman and Gregoire, they put it like this: the idea of growth after adversity has been touted by not only ancient and modern wisdom traditions, but also recent psychology research. This phenomenon is known in the scientific community as post-traumatic growth. And phrasing Nietzsche, they finish, what doesn't kill us may make us not only stronger, but also more creative. This, the ability to become more creative in the face of a disaster, is the gauntlet thrown down by Yom Kippur this year. Yom Kippur 5781 in the year of the pandemic. How do we respond to extraordinary adversity? Rebuilding our own lives and that of the community can be incredibly challenging. Sometimes it involves relinquishing deep-seated goals, identities, and assumptions about the world while building new goals and aspirations. For a community with its provision ravaged by closures, restrictions, we have been extraordinarily creative, but much more rethinking is required in terms of inclusivity, sustainability, and ways to include the broadest range of ages, types, despite the restrictions, both of the pandemic and the requirement that we must operate obviously within halacha, within Jewish law. This will mean compromise for all of us to ensure that the youth, children, young families, the seniors and the isolated can all remain included, and in fact more included than ever before. And on Yom Kippur, particularly at Kol Nidrei, that's what Kol Nidrei is really about letting go of connections and ideas and commitments, being open to change, re-examining the past, releasing our connections to unhealthy versions of ourselves, and opening our minds to the future. On Yom Kippur, I can state that Golders Green Synagogue has always risen to the challenge of change. And I know that we will this time as well. But there's much to do. And I know that we will do our very best and to become our most creative in the tough time ahead, in the remaining months of restrictions and beyond. It will be exhausting, exhilarating, personally and communally, but I'm up for it, and I hope you are too. And it will open the door to a new life for ourselves, our families and our communities. This Yom Kippur, like no other, is a chance to reconsider our priorities and use what we will agree is a deeply unwanted and unwelcome disruption to our lives to channel our creativity for the good, for our families and for the human race. Remember, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but can also make us more creative. Wishing all of us a Gemar Chasima Tova, a good sealing, an end to the Yom Kippur process in good health, and wishing us a good Gebenchtjahr, a year of blessing, a year in which we can look back and say, when we said in Ovinu Malkeinu this Yom Kippur, Mana Magefo Minach Losecho, which is asking God to eliminate the plague, we can look back and say that it was a year that has passed, we've changed and grown, and thank God a degree of normality is restored. But in the meantime, fast well, celebrate Yom Tov well, and if you're not with us in Shul, do your very best to join us in thought, and we will have you in mind throughout the day. Good Yom Tov.